been saved by them or that were able to be evacuated by the government when they were pulling out of the rest of America, had the great confrontation of the uncertainty of their futures, primarily when it came to what they had owned, what they had lost prior. Coming from this great legal debate and other associating reactions to such a thing, the bounty system was formed. Essentially, if anyone could provide legal documentation with a government seal or government nomination or any other such effects, a payout would be given. Now, the people of the Lost saw this as an opportunity, forming an entire economy around bounty. With that came takers. Individuals that would go out into the Lost beyond the safety of their enclaves in order to do odd jobs for any number of clientele. Whether it was clearing areas of zombies, collecting certain items or effects, or just hunting down a particular person or casualty in order to give closure to a family. Takers would take any job needed because that's what they needed to do to make ends meet. No one becomes a taker because they want to. No one wants to go out and possibly get killed at a moment's notice. You do it because you have to, because that's the only way that you're going to keep the lights on or be allowed to stay, because money is always tight. The ultimate goal of any sane taker is retirement. To be able to save up enough bounty to get smuggled into the recession and live a normal, or at least what amounts to normal now, life. We don't need to worry about that. We just need to worry about getting you guys through your first days. Your main opposition in this world are known as casualties. Only people that come from the recession to find opportunity out in the Lost, otherwise known as bait, call them zombies. Casualties come in some two main forms. There are standard casualties, your usual John Romero slow-moving hordes that shamble about from one meal to the next. Then there are vectors. Those are your 28 days later nightmares. Entire enclaves can be killed by a single one due to how fast they are and how infectious they are. A casualty bite could turn you in hours, days, maybe a week. A vector bite will turn you in seconds. There are, of course, other rumors of other types of casualties in the world, though that's mostly just speculation and rumor. And yeah, that's about all I've got for that.
Wowee.
Oh, wow.
Now, going over the system, for those that haven't read, of course, the system is called the Prophet system. Essentially, it's a collection of D10 rolls, usually 2 D10s, one being the black dice and one being a red dice. Essentially, whenever you're making a check, the difficulty isn't decided purely by me, of course. I will, of course, add negatives and stuff like that as sees fit as the market. But your fate is almost always within your own dice's hands, or I guess in Roll20's hands. Whenever you're making a check, the only thing you need to do to succeed is make sure that your black is higher than your red. Along with that, most rolls are needed to be bought, quote unquote. You guys will have gear and equipment and other things that you will have to use charges or uses of that item in order to roll. There are some rolls, like those that are purely social or mental, that don't require to be bought, but most other things like running or sprinting, or running and sprinting is the same thing. Running or attacking with a melee weapon or shooting or other such things will require a use of a tool or a weapon. And we can get into that later when we get into actual gear stuff. For now, though, let's get into character creation, and I will explain some different things if you guys have already taken a look and made some copies of the Red Market's character sheet.
I suppose you want our links to those.
Oh, that would be very helpful, yes. Just like if you guys have like questions or you're pointing something out, I can quickly zoom over and do what I need to do. So yeah, you guys can filter those on in as you will. And if when everyone's on their sheet, I hope everyone is, I'll start our next little phase here. Just be sure, because I'm not quite sure I heard their voice. Wrath, you are here, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just making sure.
No, can't really talk because my jaw hurts.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll try and keep talking to a minimal, at least for these first parts. Let's see. Okay. Okay. I'm only gonna need this up here. Oh, and I do need to get a thing real quick. Or actually, would it be in here? Yes, it is. Thank God. Cool beans. Okay, so getting into character creation explanations. First things first is your take your name. As with the world that you guys now inhabit, no one uses their real names anymore. Not only because the government has declared everyone that was in the loss at the time of evacuation legally dead, but also because if your goal is to get into the recession, having a name that can be tracked to whatever evil deeds or things that you've done in the past is not good on if you want to avoid having a rap sheet in your new life that you hopefully are able to carve out for yourselves. Taker names are usually, well, nicknames or even just internet handles, so to speak. I have a comprehensive list. If everyone, like a big like alphabetical like reference list of a bunch of names, if you guys need like inspiration and stuff. But it's stuff like calling yourself let me just pull out a couple random ones from here. It's stuff like calling yourself Plan B or Rav or Ziddle 2. What's a good one here? N/A, not applicable. Mr_Dude_Guy. Oh god, this one's a long one. Lowercase x, uppercase x, lowercase x, N3RF, nerf, underscore vector, that's spelled V3C70RF, 5,
Someone was extra.
uppercase x, lowercase x, 420, comma, Knight Commander of Weed Lord Boner Hitler's 69th unit.
Who lets this happen?
Jesus.
When people
just
can pick their
copy.
own usernames for their official name.
Yeah, it's usually your username. I guess another thing I forgot about when it comes to the world. The reason why it's like that is because good thing about the world, global Wi-Fi, free public Wi-Fi is 24/7 and great. So that's there. Other problem is all other forms of communication are not working anymore at all. So everything is based on a site or forums site called Lifelines, which essentially is your internet.
Love that. The backstory on the whole Lifelines thing is fucking wild. If you guys haven't read the document for it.
It's a time. So you guys come up with your taker names. After that is your crew. That's for your crew name. Don't worry about that just yet, because you guys will be coming up with your crew name together later. After that, of course, is your weak spot. I did type up an explanation of what a weak spot and a soft spot is, but if anyone wants me to go over it again, I totally can. It's up to you guys. Yeah. It's a weak and a soft, yeah. So a weak spot is a character flaw that defines your character's personality, despite that it's kind of like a shortcoming almost. When other people would so to speak, if someone's complaining about you, your weak spot is one of the things that they might complain about you about.
Okay.
Things like being arrogant or vengeful or cowardly or hating a particular type of person or not being good with authority and other stuff like that. Your soft spot is your character's kind of passion or belief or a sentiment that your character holds, despite the fact that they've been in the apocalypse for 5 years and have probably lost many a friend and a family. It's stuff like upholding justice or wanting to protect people that are weaker than you or having a kind of like a soft spot for children. It's that sort of stuff. Again, with both your weak spot and your soft spot, you're going to want it to be, it can be anything. You're going to want to have it be something that is vague enough that it can apply to different, multiple situations, but specific enough, of course, that it can still pertain to your character. And along with that, usually it is written out in like sort of like a phrase, rather than just kind of on the nose. So for someone that is like more passive or doesn't want like violence or has like a soft spot for wanting to get through situations without violence, instead of just saying like diplomatic or passive as their soft spot, it would be something like, can't we all be friends, as a phrase for a soft spot. Any questions when it comes to soft spots and weak spots?
Not so far.
Okay. Now, the reason behind soft spots and weak spots, for those that have played WoD, it is a lot like your virtue and your vice. For those that haven't, essentially, how it works within Red Markets is whenever you play your character towards their weak spot or their soft spot to the point that it gets you, yourself, your team, or someone else into trouble for it, you get a willpower. Even if, and we'll get into what willpower is when we get to the actual like other stats, but you will get a willpower back even if you have like your max capacity of willpower, or like you are at like your max amount that you could have, you get one above your max. You get it once per mission or once per run or job, but you can play both or one or the other, or you can satisfy, if you can satisfy both, that's 2 that you get for that job, essentially, on top of whatever you already have.
Nice. Extremely nice.
After that is your tough spot, which is a lot like your D&D class system almost. It also kind of sets what your character's kind of history has been since the crash or even during the crash. I will go through, I'm not going to go like word for word or anything like that, but I'll go through kind of what all of them are and what all of them kind of mean and their bonuses and their negatives that they encounter. So starting off kind of at the top, you have your good old-fashioned lost class, essentially, which is essentially you're setting your past, your character's past, as the fact that they weren't evacuated when the military started to pull back from the east, from the west. Either they didn't get a chance to get evacuated, or they didn't trust the military, or something else happened, but they were in the loss when it was declared a loss. They are legally dead in the eyes of the government, in the eyes of the rest of the world. But they have survived despite that. Your bonus for taking the lost class is called Adapt. Essentially, at character creation, you get 2 extra skill points to use. Their negative, though their drawback, is called and die. So like full thing is Adapt and die. So essentially, though, since you're as a taker, or sorry, as someone that is lost, you're legally dead. Your retirement plan has an extra step that you need to do, because you need to make yourself a new identity, an actual proper identity, in order to get to the recession. That's lost. The next one is called Bait. Essentially, bait is the slang term for someone who was lucky enough to get to the recession, to be evacuated, but was stupid enough to leave the recession in order to become a taker or to do something else in the loss. Essentially, when you're bait, you, for your 5 years, were able to be safe. You kind of were evacuated. You had not the greatest life, but you weren't dealing with casualties every 5 seconds. Things aren't the best in the recession, whether it's because you were living in a slum that is referred to as free parking, because it's literal slums put together with parts of old used cars, or for any other number of reasons. But for whatever reason, you wanted to or had to go back into the loss in order to try and carve out something better for yourself or for your family back home. The bonus of being a bait is called Citizen. Essentially, you have 1 less milestone needed to retire. This is for like if it was like a big campaign sort of thing, because you already have a place to stage yourself in the recession. You don't need to. You already have like a starting point to start at, so you don't need as much bounty to be able to go home and survive again. The negative is called Migrant, which essentially, because your friends, your family, the people you have deep connections to properly, are all back in the recession. In order to support them, you have to deal with that distance. So upkeep, which we'll get into, dependence upkeep costs double, which we'll get into when we start talking about dependence and stuff like that. The next one after that is called Latent. Latents are people that have been infected by the blight, the virus, whatever anyone could call it, but weren't turned into a casualty, at least not fully. For some reason, whether it's either because of their genome or because of using a vaccine or a temporary sort of cure called suppressin to stop themselves from going full ballistic, they have turned into a latent. Their bodies have been somewhat morphed and changed by the blight as it does to other casualties. They have pale skin, or they have black veins and sinews that have cracked and popped out of their skin in different places, and they are as infectious as a casualty would be. You can't really touch people without being careful. You can't hold someone's hand. You can't kiss anyone. You can't any sort of contact has a chance, if you're not careful, has the chance of infecting someone else. But their bonus is that it's called once bitten, and essentially once you're infected, you can't be infected again. It doesn't matter how many times a casualty might bite you, or how much of the black ichor of the blight from their bodies that somehow either gets into your eye, or if you're chugging it down, but you can't be infected by it. You've already done your time. The negative, of course, is called twice hated, because you are so infectious, people, of course, treat you differently. During the initial stages of the crash and beyond, people, of course, didn't know what latents were, and so most were shot on sight. But it's just carried on from there because people know how dangerous they are to have around. You're either kind of locked away, you're quarantined, you're used as fodder because you're great frontline troops because you can't be infected again, or any number of things. Ooh, nice ringtone.
Not again.
On the luckier scale of things, you have your next choice called immune. Essentially, you won your genetic lottery for one reason or another. You can't be infected. The actual bonus is called genetic lottery. All forms of all forms of blight can't infect you. So that's great. Bad part about that is that your negative would be called meal ticket, because you are literally a meal ticket, because the drug, the vaccine called suppressin that stops people from going full vector or casualty, is made from your bone marrow. And so everyone wants to find an immune, or most people want to find immunes and cut off their limbs one by one to get their bone marrow, so that they can have a big payday, because people will pay good money so that they can make suppressin. So your life isn't like the best. It's not the worst, but just be careful about who you tell you're immune and stuff like that, and you'll be fine. Totally. How that's represented in game, of course, is that with each hitbox that you have, it can be permanently sacrificed by yourself or destroyed by someone who's caught you, for 5 bounty. So, I mean, if ever you need to make ends meet really badly, I guess you could start cutting off your fingers and selling them.
Gotta make sure that they don't figure out where the fingers are from first.
Yeah. You can protect yourself. It's fine. You can figure that out. But yeah, hey, economic horror, everybody.
Love it.
The next class, I'll keep calling them after this, is called Believer. Essentially, when the crash happened, you fell back on your faith super hard, and that doesn't mean that you became fully God-fearing Catholics or anything like that. It could literally also be that you fell back on any sort of belief, whether the belief was religious in nature or medical in nature. There are many believers that are medical professionals who believe that if they just try a little bit harder, if they just try and figure something out or get the right equipment, they can try and cure this blight, this virus, and that's never happening, and they go insane. Researching the blight literally sends people insane. With that, your bonus is called Faith. Essentially, whenever you have to make a self-control check, which we'll get into what self-control is. Essentially, it's like your res comp, or you're keeping calm under terrible pressure. If you're able to confirm your belief, your faith, you get a +2 to that roll. Your negative is called doubt, which means you start off with one of your humanity threats cracked. And whenever someone questions your faith or something kind of changes the narrative on you or doesn't like confirm your faith, you have to make a self-control check for that. We'll get into what humanity threats are when we get to that section of the character creation. But essentially, it's like your morality system. So it's your level of going crazy. So
Love it.
believers start off just a little bit crazy already. The next class is called Steward. Stewards are essentially the boogeyman of the DHQS, of the recession. They are agents that have been sent out by the recession, by the old government, to prepare places for what is called Reclamation Day. Essentially, the recession believes that in 20 years, they will have enough power and strength, enough zombies will, they actually would call them zombies. Enough casualties would have died off or gotten slow or stuff like that, that they could just reclaim everything. They said at the beginning of the crash that they reclaimed everything and save everyone again in 20 years. They said it 1 year after the crash, and they said it again 2 years after the crash, then 3 years, all the way up to year 5, and it's still 20 years from now. People in the Lost have taken to calling it what was the phrase? I was about to say ETA 0, but I cannot actually remember the proper thing. I have it written down somewhere though. It is called Dooba T-never. Because that's never happening, totally. So as this boogeyman, you are essentially an agent, whether it's a sleeper agent or other double agent or whatever, but you've been sent out by the government for one reason or another. You don't always know what your orders are. You don't even know who's giving your orders. There could be another steward 2 houses down from you doing something completely different, and you will never meet. But you are trained, you are willing, and you're ready to do your part for your overlords. Or you will find out that you don't kind of want to do what they tell you to do, because many a horror story has been spread around of stewards gathering up once their objectives have been completed and laying waste to entire enclaves. They're your boogeyman, that's for sure. Their bonus is called Undercover, where once per game, your character can call your overlord, your handler, and ask for help on a mission, or on the mission that you're doing. If it's up to the market, i.e. me as the GM, to say if they say yes or no, but if you're able to spin your mission as that it's mission critical, that they help you in some way, shape, or form, then you could get some help from some people pretty powerful in order to help out on your mission. Your negative, of course, is called In Too Deep, where this kind of comes into play with the dependent system, which we'll get into play, which I'll talk about when we get there. But essentially, stewards can only have other takers in their crew as dependents. And with that, if ever your cover is blown and your team finds out about it, everyone in your team has to roll a self-control check to not freak the fuck out about it. And along with that, your overlords will be giving you orders from time to time to do certain things, whether it's to take certain jobs over others, or whether to change the narrative of your job a little bit and make sure that maybe the item that you're supposed to get just somehow gets lost down a specific storm drain somewhere or something. The next one is called Hustler. Essentially, you survived the crash because you knew people. You're the guy that knows a guy that knows a guy that knows someone's cousin, and you're loving it. You're living the life with that. You kind of got through your way with charisma or deceit or any sort of sense of criminality, but you got through it. Your bonus is called I Know a Guy, which is literally you know a guy. Whenever you're making a networking check, which is your role to see if you know someone or if or like getting certain items, like buying things like gear is done with like a networking check, you succeed instantly. You don't even need to have skill points. So if you need to source gear or stuff like that, you already know someone. The downside though is called I Owe a Guy. Because of your past, once per game, I can have someone from your past come up to you and you need to essentially pay them off. Whether it's a debtor or someone that you owe, you're always going to have someone that can try and come and collect on you for things that you've done in your past. With that, it's just a 1d10 roll of how much bounty gets taken from you, making your life infinitely harder.
How much fun we would have with that.
And of course, if you can't pay, then they'll find a way to make you pay. Whether that's through you or your dependents. Is this the last one? No, it's not. We're almost there though. Like 3 away. Next one's called Scavenger. Where here's your hoarder class. When the crash happened, you were really good at finding places and things and gathering it up to survive. Your bonus is called Salvage. Salvage everywhere. Sorry, let me say that properly. I always say it not properly. Salvage. Salvage everywhere. You start the game with 20 bounty instead of 10. For character creation or for anything. Your negative is called Not a Screw That Fits, where your refresh, you're always at a -1 refresh because your concept of what's useful right now and what could be useful is skewed. Because you're a hoarder. And we'll get into what refreshes are when we get into potentials and stuff like that. Your next class is called Roach. Essentially, you've survived and you've seen shit. You've seen a lot of shit. You've been through all the rough stuff that happened with the crash, and you are still alive to tell the tales of it. Your bonus is called Survivor. At any point in time, you can take humanity damage, which we'll get into again, to assist any skill check that you want at a +1 per whatever point you sacrifice. So if you sacrifice 2 points of humanity in one of the categories, that would be a +2 on whatever check you want to do. The negative is called Lone. So the full phrase, I guess, is Lone Survivor. Where your past experiences have left you more than a little bit unhinged because tragedy and because holy fuck, it's the zombie apocalypse. You start off with all 3 of your first stages of your humanity cracked, which we'll get into what that means exactly. But essentially, you're a little cuckoo, just a little bit. And that's all the classes.
Eee.
Does anyone have any questions before I continue?
No.
All right.
It's a remarkably silent day.
Yeah, well, that's completely fine.
Mm.
With that, we'll move on to potentials and skills. So, potentials are your character's knowledge of cultivating a skill, essentially. It's not exactly your raw potential as much as it's also the knowledge of facilitating and maintaining that strength that you have. For example, strength, the STR potential, is not just your raw available strength, but also your knowledge on proper diet, the right exercises to be doing to maintain muscle mass, the ability to understand what food you should be eating and what food you shouldn't be eating to be bodybuilding, essentially. Strength also comes into play with your hull. Hull essentially is a lot of things in Red Markets is more relative. Hull is the relative amount of an item that is a profitable amount. Hull is the difference between having one gun and having a box full of guns. Weight isn't ever really an issue. It's just that if you have the hull strength to carry it. So if you have one gun's going to take up a gear slot, but one box of guns is only going to take up one hull slot, essentially. So hull is the amount of profitable goods you can carry in large quantities. Speed handles your speed. It is your movement speed when you're sprinting. Again, everything is more relative. Lots of things, most things are handled in shambles, as is the distance that's called. How many shambles something is from you. With one speed, you can, if you're sprinting or if you're running, you can move one shamble if you succeed. So speed's pretty useful if you're wanting to run away from things or get to things quickly. Adaptability is handles your character being able to do it, not only just adapt to different situations, but also being prepared for different situations. Adaptability gives you something called refreshes. Refreshes are essentially whenever you're using an item and you run out of charges for it, you can use a refresh to refresh that item to full. So if you're firing a gun and you run out of ammo, you can always call it at any time to use a refresh to essentially have your character had the forethought to pack extra ammo and be able to reload. And that works with almost pretty much every item, save for the ones that can't be refreshed. And that will be in the gear under the gear description. The next one is intelligence, which of course is intelligence, or at least general knowledge that your character is able to procure. I'm not gonna speak English anymore, I don't think.
Procure.
Thank you. Next up is charm or charisma, which is how charismatic you are. And will is your will points. Whatever amount you put into your will is the amount of will points that you have. Will points are like willpower and Will of the Darkness, as I said before, but it lets you do some pretty cool things in terms of not dying horribly. Whenever you fail a roll, you can use a willpower to switch the results on your red dice and your black dice. So if you rolled for something and you got 3 on your black dice and 6 on your red dice, you can spend a willpower to switch it so that it's 6 on your black dice and 3 on your red dice instead, essentially an instant success. If you crit fail, you can use a willpower to make it a normal fail. If you succeed, if you crit succeed, you can spend a willpower to add additional bonuses to yourself, or like narrative bonuses to yourself. So if a crit success, like hitting a zombie, would like knock it over, you can also add that it with a willpower, you can also add the fact that like it broke something as well. There's a whole list of things that willpower can do. I can quickly go and get that for y'all, so you guys can actually see for those visual learners out there. But that is essentially what will is, as I quickly go and try and find where I put this picture. Ooh, did I misplace it? I can just make it a new one, I guess. Where are you? Here it is. I'll just get a picture of this and I'll send it to you guys into the Red Markets chat. So here's all the things that Will can do. Right there. Now, along with that, potentials also set one other thing. They are also your maximum that you can get into a skill. If you wanted to have two skill points in unarmed, you would need to have at least 2 potential in strength. You cannot go over your potential, but you can definitely go under it, of course. It's never a problem. But your potential sets your maximum for your skills in that category. Along with that, when it comes to character creation, you can't have over 3 at character creation in potential. So that handles potential mostly.
The sheets do all of that automatically, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you put something over 4 in a potential,
it goes
it goes red.
Handy, very handy.
Very handy. So with that, onto skills. You have got unarmed, which is of course the skill of punching things in the face, mostly punching things in the face or kicking things. You have melee, which is the skill of using melee weapons. Resistance is the skill for literally exerting your strength, whether it is to pull something or to push something open or to lift something that's heavy. That is where resistance comes into play. It is the actual use of your raw potential. In the speed category, you have shoot, which is the art of shooting things with ranged weapons. You have stealth, which is the art of being quiet. Athletics, which is the art of running the fuck away when things get really bad, or running towards things, or climbing and other things like that. In the adaptability category, you have awareness, which is for seeing things. It is your perception and your hearing. Self-control, which is the art of not going fucking insane or freaking the hell out when things happen. You have scavenging, which is for literally scavenging and looting off of buildings or dead bodies or other things. You have drive, which is for driving vehicles, I believe it also works for ridden or rideable animals, of course, as well. And then you have criminality, which is the art of understanding how crime works. That is your it's not just your understanding of like law and stuff like that, but also sorry, I'm blanking. Also lock picking, pickpocketing, all your like lower end crime stuff. That is your skill in being able to do it. Next up, in the intelligence category, you have foresight, which is the art of having foresight. Essentially, at different times, you can ask me as the market, or I'll intercede and say for you guys to roll it. But essentially, it's your character knowing things about an area because of either having knowledge beforehand, or by asking around and stuff. And again, everything's very relative. You never have to say like, I'm going to research this thing in particular. That would be a research roll, but you can always kind of have a foresight on different things if it applies. Because you guys have lived in the apocalypse for 5 years. There is research, which is the art of researching things, looking up things on lifelines, whether it is on different people, on your mission area, and other things. That is where that comes into play. Research, of course, requires that you have something to use to research, though. So if you're wanting to put points into research, then pieces of gear that have connection to the internet or other such things will be very helpful for you, because otherwise you can't really do it, depending on factors. Mechanics, of course, is the art of crafting and building things and setting up traps and repairing stuff. That's where all your mechanics come into play. First aid, of course, is for healing people. And profession is a skill that is more associated with its specializations, but it's essentially as it is profession. If you used to be a mechanic, you can put points into profession and have one of its specializations be mechanic. With that allows for you to do a lot more things with certain skills, essentially. So mechanics might get you to be able to repair a flat tire, but you can't make a car from scratch, or you can't fix certain parts of it, like an actual like engine block sort of thing. You can do like rudimentary things. But if you had profession mechanics, or profession, and then you had your specialization in being a mechanic as your profession, you could roll your profession skill instead, and that could be used for doing higher end things, like making a car from scratch. Or another example, first aid can handle someone cutting themselves open, but you can't do surgery. If you had profession and your specialization was doctor, you could use your profession skill to do surgery on someone. So that's that. Next area, you have networking. That is your ability to know someone, essentially. It's used for selling things, it's used for buying things, it's used for some other things here and there. But it is how well you are at knowing people or getting in touch with people. You have persuasion, which is for persuading people, of course. Sensitivity, which is for reading people when they're either really angry or sad, or when they're trying to hide their emotions from you. Deception, which is for lying. Intimidation, which is for scaring people. And leadership, which is twofold. It is for swaying and convincing large groups of people in a certain setting. The difference between, of course, persuasion would be convincing a few people to buy you a drink, whereas a leadership would be convincing someone to charge into death, or like a group of soldiers to charge to death with you. Leadership is also very important for negotiations, or at least one phase of it. So having someone with good leadership and good persuasion, some other things, comes into play with the negotiations portion, which I'll explain when we get to it. But essentially, it's like the backbone of your crew. Essentially, whenever you guys take a mission, you have to negotiate for the price, because everyone's going to want to stiff you. And if you, of course, don't get a good enough price, you could be left with not enough money to survive in the next week. So having a party face is somewhat important, even if it does make them a bit weaker when it comes to actual problems like casualties or other such things. But it is what gets you guys to eat at the end of things. That is the skills and the potentials. There is one thing about the potentials I did not go into, and that is the charisma, one of the charisma things, because it actually leads into dependence and references. So before I get into that, does anyone have any questions?
So with specializations, if you just have a point in it, do you just get one if that's there?
No. So how specializations work is you do have to purchase them, as it costs the same as a skill. But how it works, specialization doesn't, with how it works for things that aren't profession, what specializations do is it allows you to use certain types of equipment. So I believe, what was it? I think it's I think bows. I think bows need you to have an archery specialization in order to use a bow and arrow. I think also swords and some other things also need a specialization. It's not necessary to get a specialization in things. It only allows you to use certain items. So if you really want your character to use a bow and arrow, that's when you'd want to invest in a specialization so that they could use a particular type of equipment.
Okay.
The only time it works like giving you more options when it comes to like rolling or doing certain tasks is with profession. And again, that only when it comes to like using items, it's only items that require a specialization to use them, that require you to put have a specialization point in something.
Nice. Okay.
For instance, like drive, you can't drive a helicopter. You'd have to have a profession pilot.
You tell me I can't drive a helicopter.
Yeah, no, you can't. I'm sorry. Unless you're a pilot, you're not getting that thing off the air. I mean, I'll let you, but you're going to die.
Alright, guess I'm gonna be a helicopter pilot.
So yeah. Any other questions?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So, with that, for the final thing for potential, charisma or also establishes how many references your character can have and how many dependents your character have. So if you have a 3 in charisma, you can have 3. You have 3 dependents and you have 3 references. Now, starting off with references first, because it's kind of easier to explain and a bit more like, you get the good news first and then the bad news. References essentially are people that your character have come into contact with or you have contact with that can help you. Whenever you fail certain roles, or really any role, as long as you can get into contact with your reference will essentially help you succeed. For instance, if someone was rolling to see if they knew anything like foresight on a particular area that you guys are passing, and you fail, you can call up a reference and they'll tell you about the area. They'll give you a success essentially. But it does use up the reference. Essentially how references work, other than just like mechanically like that, but your references remain blank until you use them. When you're using a reference, when you fail a roll and you want to use a reference, at that time, you just say, well, market, I want to use a reference. I'll ask you who your reference is that you're going to use, and you come up with a name and a character that can help you in your current flight. So if you need it for something like mechanics, you would say something like along the lines of, yeah, my reference is Billy Joel Pete. He's a mechanic in the enclave that we live in, and we hang out from time to time or whatever, something like that, right? With that, you write down your reference name, what he does, who he is, with like his profession, and you. From there was a little small scene where you talk to your reference and they try to help you. And from there, then you mark down on your sheet where you see the little boxes to the side when it says references, the drop-down boxes. You would put a mark down in needy. Because your reference helped you out, you need to repay him in some way. Now, it's not literally, again, it's relative and it's up to you. It could be literally that you owe him money. It could just be that you need to spend a bit more time with him, so to speak. Like you need to, like you promise, like, oh yeah, we'll hang out sometime. I'll buy the beers this time, sort of thing. So it can be as casual or as professional as you want. But again, remember, references are purely kind of like mostly professional. They can like you, or you can have your references like you, but you don't have to like the person you work with, so to speak. So relationships on that end can be very varied, depending on who you choose and how I, as the market, have them interact with you. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there are dependents. Now, dependents are people that your character has very deep bonds with. There are people that your character wants or needs to support, whether it's because they're your family and it's expected of you, of course, you don't want them to starve to death, or it's just someone that you know that is having really kind of rough times and can't, for one reason or another, do the same things that you need to do to survive or function properly in this world, that you need to help. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that every dependent is a cripple. It could be a child, it could be someone that's older, or any other number of reasons. It's up to you. But for one reason or another, they aren't, for one reason or another, your character supports them, whether it's because you feel guilty or something, or because you love them, or whatever. The relationship you set with them is your own. For your dependents, you write down their name, some like basic descriptors and stuff like that, or what, like a title or something. And how dependents work is that every job, every week, you have to pay your dependents. If you have 3 in charisma, that means you have 3 dependents, and that means you have to pay 3 bounty every week to keep them relatively okay in this world. If ever you miss a payment or you refuse a payment, that does not mean that your dependent starts hating you or anything like that. It's just that their life gets a little bit harder for them. Their tracks move a bit differently from references, whereas with references, the more you use them, the more you have to kind of like pay for them, or until eventually they don't like you anymore. They don't see you as viable as a professional reference or anything like that. With dependents, you get to see their life get worse and worse as they move from needy with the first missed payment to strained with the second missed payment, and eventually severed, where something terrible eventually finally occurs and they are ripped from your life, whether it's completely final and they're dead, or the thing that you wanted to protect in the most, whether it's a spark of innocence or something else, is completely faded now. When you lose a reference, it sucks. You aren't able to get another reference back. That slot is gone because they are now bad-mouthing you. But when you lose a dependent, it's devastating. It is crippling to your character. You instantly take full damage in a humanity threat level. You move from, you get a crack or you get a crumble or something like that. And we'll get into what those are when we get to humanity threats. But essentially, it fucks your character up real bad because you wanted to support these, you wanted to protect these people. It's a very deep relationship. So it's essentially the main things with how dependents work. Any questions? Khan, is that a question?
Well, yeah, but not about dependence, sorry.
Okay. Well, what is it? Is it?
Skipping back to the skills and specializations thing.
Yeah, we can go back. Whenever, if you have a question about anything ever, just hit me. It's fine. What's going on with skills and potentials?
If I got a 1 level in shoot but 2 in crossbow, would that affect how good I am at shooting the crossbow? Or
no, it wouldn't. So, first things first. It kind of works like what's the right phrase for it? Essentially, your skill can't be above your potential. Your specialty can't be above your skill.
Okay, cool.
So it works that way with that. Getting more points in a certain specialization, I'll have to double check, but from the first time I checked, I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually add a bonus. It would allow you to use even more exotic forms of that weapon if those were to come up. So whereas like level 1 would let you use like any crossbow you could find or buy, if you guys encountered a crazy person who made some super souped up version of a crossbow, it might require a bit more specialization than just having some backyard practice to be able to figure out what the fuck is going on with that.
Makes sense. All right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Upon hearing about dependence, I did a 180 on my character already.
Oh yeah? Oh no.
I was like, oh no, I have a better idea.
Oh no.
I kind of hit that point myself.
Hey, well this is why we make characters together, guys.
It's fun.
Any other questions about anything? Other than humanity tests, we're gonna get to humanity tests.
We can only have one dependent unless we put something into the charisma skill, right?
Don't say it's like a bad thing. Yeah. So if you have one charisma, you only have one dependent. Essentially, I guess a way to think about charisma as well is how good, with like the potential of it, is how good your character is and how much practice they have with actually having healthy relationships and talking to people. So,
Right.
So it's like a double-edged sword of like, you know people, but also, God, you also care about people.
Ah, shit.
Oh man, I'm a healthy social being. Oh God.
It can really ruin a man.
Oh,
do
the
we just-
humanity.
So do we just leave references blank in dependents until you use them?
No. So references stay blank until you need to use them, of course. Dependents are written out beforehand.
Okay.
So you can come up with however many charisma you have amount of people that your character gives a shit about.
Okay. Gotcha.
To the point of needing or wanting to pay for them for their life here in the wastelands, in the Lost.
If we leave it blank, that does leave it open for picking up friendlies along the way. Yes.
No.
No. Okay.
If you want to pick up someone new later in an actual campaign, if you want to pick up someone new, you need to raise your potential in charisma. But then when you do, you'd have to pick another dependent, but you can make it that person that you wanted to provide for.
So if you don't pick anyone right now, that's
You have
it.
to pick
You
someone
have to pick
now.
someone. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody starts with one dependent.
Gotcha.
Everyone starts with the amount of dependence that is their charisma.
Mm.
Otherwise, you've never had multiple healthy relationships, so you wouldn't have the potential for charisma at the first place.
I mean, like, what if they died after the zombies and stuff, or during that?
Well, that's a different problem. Different problem, same mechanic. I'm sorry.
Gosh.
Because then you're looking at humanity damage right there.
If you were a roach, could you have that excuse?
You could, but it would still work the same way.
Yeah, more and more.
But you can definitely have the excuse that the reason why you're a roach and the reason why you have all that humanity threat damage and you're kind of cracked is because you lost your family.
Yeah.
And everything's relative and everything enhances the story and stuff. It's it's a kind of very narrative sort of gimmick for some stuff.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, any other questions? Right, move on.
I have a really quick dependent question.
Yeah, sure. What's up?
So, are dependents with you at all times, or do they stay at home, stay at the place of residence, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so your dependents stay at your enclave or wherever you're living at the time. They first off, no one wants to go out into the waste, into the lost. No one wants to deal with that shit. But also, for one reason or another, even if they were super desperate, they don't really have that thing as an option. Again, as I said before, that doesn't mean that they're crippled. That could just mean that they're too young or some other reasonings that you guys can come up with. But they can't, when things go real tough, they can't pick up a gun and go out into the lost to try and make ends meet. You guys can.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right.
But also, along with that, doesn't mean your dependent always needs to be a tragic figure. Your dependent can be very well off, or well off enough that, again, it's not that they're crippled, it's not that they're always struggling and starving. They could literally just be someone that is an artist, but because their whole thing, the reason why they're your dependent is because as an artist, it's not really valued by the community that you're in. Therefore, they're not really getting paid as much as someone that is killing zombies would. And so they need that extra support to be able to still go out and let their passion and their talent still cultivate and grow and stuff like that. And you want to support that. It can be as simple as that. Or yeah, you could make someone who has no legs and is always on death's door and you need to get medicine for him constantly or whatever. I mean, it's up to you.
If we want the Grimdark, we can have the Grimdark.
I want a Grimdark. I'll play it. I don't got nothing. I'm already scraping the bottom of the barrel here. I'll go for the slime. I'm fine over here.
Tragic.
I'll hold the tragic in my hands. I'll give it to you guys if you want it.
No!
Beat it.
You don't want that juicy storytelling?
Oh, don't worry.
Can't you have juice without, like, lemon juice?
Juicy
It can be anything but sour.
It's pulpy lemon juice.
Great storytelling of you missing payments to pay off your loved one's like medical bill and watching them slowly degrade.
I'd rather not.
Where did I get that bounty then?
Then you better go save him.
I'm a scavenger. I already got the bounty.
So then moving on quickly, humanity threats. Humanity threats are the different ways your character can start going a bit nutso. Or getting more and more desperate, essentially. There are 3 humanity threats: detachment, stress, and trauma. Detachment is how much you don't give a shit about other people. You start getting more antisocial, more reclusive, that sort of thing. And you start like generally kind of not trusting the people around you with anything. Stress is like life kind of stress, the life of being a taker, the life of living out here in the loss. It's mostly for things such as missing payments or not having enough money and need to borrow money from someone, or your team is generally untrustworthy and you have to stake your entire life on them. That's stress. Trauma, of course, is for trauma. If you get shot in the chest with a shotgun, it takes almost all your HP down. That's trauma. If you're being chased by a casualty horde, that's trauma. If you watch a fellow taker get eaten alive, that's trauma. With how humanity threats work, as you can see, there are multiple sets of drop-down boxes there. Essentially, you have 15 boxes in each humanity threat, and they all travel up kind of like a conga line. If you fill up on a humanity threat in one box, you experience whatever is to the right of that box. So for your first 3 boxes there, if you fill up on, say, detachment, stress, or trauma, you experience something called a crack. After that, if you get then 10 damage in something, it's a crumble, and then 15 damage is a break. Your character breaks. Now, I only put down stuff for crack and the explanations of what the different options for crack is, because I don't expect anyone to get to crumble in this. Though you guys can try and prove me wrong. But essentially, going back to how it works, when you fill up something with 5 damage, humanity damage, you crack. You then have to choose in that scene, in that moment, from the options available to you. There's fight, flight, and freeze. Fight means that your character goes into a berserker-esque frenzy and needs to pick something and needs to kill it and keep killing it and keep killing it. Even if it's dead, just keep killing it. The only way to pull a character from that frenzy is to physically pull them from the scene. It doesn't matter if they're being surrounded by other things and a bunch of other stuff that's going on. They are stuck in that fight mode. The The other option is flight. Your character will do everything in their power to escape the situation. If people need to be left behind, you'll leave them. If your mission specific cargo needs to be dropped to be able to go faster, you'll drop it. It doesn't matter what's what, you need to get out. Your character will only come to once they are out of the scene entirely. And your character essentially has had a blackout. They don't know how they got to where they were. One second they were in with the rest of the team, the next second they're in a tree 5 miles away. It's bad. But it's also safe for you because you won't die, hopefully. The last option is freeze, where your character enters into a state of shock and they just stand there. They're completely helpless for the entire scene. They have to be moved around by the party or pulled to do things. They essentially take a timeout. They just go blank for a bit there. And those are your 3 options of crack. So essentially, if you fill up on one threat, you choose one of those. If then you fill up on another one, so say you filled up on stress for the first block, and you chose flight, you cross off flight or you delete flight from your options there in the notes. And then if you ever fill up on, say, trauma or stress, you have to choose the only 2 remaining options until all of them are gone. Make sense?
Horrific, but yeah.
Okay, cool.
I have a quick question. I chose Fenceman, or Fenceman, and it says, my sleep starts cracked.
Right. So, oh my god, did I forget Fenceman as an option?
You did, yeah.
Oh my god, no one told me? Oh my god, I'm the worst.
It's fine.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I'll answer your question and I'll talk about Fenceman because they deserve a spot. I'm real sorry. I'm stupid. So you choose essentially which of the 3 threats is filled. It's kind of like you kind of get the set, like whether the reason why they cracked was because of a detachment or because of stress or because of trauma. So you choose which one's filled. You take the little box of the one you want to fill and you go on the drop down and you do the one that has all the X's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there you choose one of the 3 responses and you delete one of them. All right?
Okay. Yes, I see.
Okay. Now, doing what I should have done, because I forgot about Fenceman. And I'm sorry. So, Fencemen are essentially the people that were during the initial stages of the crash were the people that guarded the defenses of the enclave of the settlement. Their job was essentially 24/7, 7 days a week, killing casualties that got caught up on the walls or the fences or whatever the defenses were. Essentially making them kind of like casualty killing machines almost. Their bonus, of course, is called headshots, which whenever a fenceman or a taker is fighting a casualty or a vector, they get a +1 on any attack they make because they're always ready to pop a casualty in the head. Their negative is called in my sleep because killing the undead in 12-hour shifts all day every day, when you get to see elderly, undead, infants, probably people that you know as well that walk up to the fence, that you have to then look them in the eye and kill them over and over and over again, is kind of fucked up. So that's fun. And that's Fenceman. I'm sorry I forgot about them. Oh god.
Well, now we know how fucked up they are. Special fucked up.
Special babies.
Special babies.
I am so sorry if you could hear that.
It's all right. It's all right. You need food?
Desperately.
You should get something
eat.
to eat.
No rush.
There is no food in my household.
No.
It's a kind of a problem.
It's fine. We'll do shopping someday.
Can you order something?
Nah,
Conscript
I
brother.
live in like bumfuck nowhere, so there's no delivery.
No.
Conscription brother.
I can't rely on him all the time. Anyway, I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
Okay.
Just sorry about the noise.
Okay. So the only other thing with that is health. As you can see, it's all separated into boxes. Every part of your body has its own health bar. There are 2 types of damage. There's stun damage and there's kill damage. Stun damage is your usual bruising. It's your bashing damage in WoD. It's small cuts and scrapes, stuff that's superficial. Kill damage is stuff that will kill you, of course. If you fill up on stun damage, something bad happens to your limb, but it's not terrible. It can be bad in the situation, totally, but not like, not completely terrible. If you fill up on kill damage in a limb, it's bad. It can go from anywhere from just being mechanically that it's filled up with lethal damage. It could be that your limb gets maimed permanently, or you lose it. So it's a time.
F.
Along with that, concerning damage and casualties, whenever a casualty does, casualties only deal lethal damage, unless you have armor or something that can change it to stun damage. But whenever a casualty does lethal damage to a part of your body and it gets through, you have to roll to see if you're infected.
Hey.
Now, most of the time, if you don't have certain items, I roll to see if you're infected or not. And you don't know it. So you get the great panic of when you get bitten, or sinew gets into your bloodstream, or something happens, of thinking whether you're going to turn into a casualty in a few hours. Your team has to roll some self-control because that's their teammate, a person that's with them, that could turn into a vector in who knows how long. Or any other number of things. Now, there are items that can see when you get bit, can help you figure out if you're infected or not. And essentially, with those items, I don't have to roll for you anymore. You get to roll for yourself, and you're able to use will and stuff like that. Otherwise, I roll for you, and it's all up to the hands of the market on whether you will turn in a few seconds or a few hours or a day or a week and either chomp on your Tager team, or maybe you'll turn Vector in your bed with your significant other and munch them in their sleep.
This is horrible.
Launch.
Yeah. Crunch.
Tasty people.
I'm just so mad.
It's the items are like the blood testing unit and stuff, right?
Yeah, the blood testing kit, and there's some other things as well. So yeah,
Terrifying.
fun
Love
things.
it.
Now, along with that, I'll let you know there are 2 other options when it comes to being infected. You could get lucky, and your character is naturally immune. So, essentially, you become, even without having to take the tough spot, you become immune. You can't be infected again, whether your character knows it or not. Or, you can get unlucky in various ways. I guess lucky and unlucky at the same time. And your character can be naturally latent.
Oh, so they don't need the suppressant to
You don't need a suppressant to become latent. Some people just become latent sometimes. It's a dice roll, literally. Now, The reason why I say being naturally latent is unlucky is because when you're naturally immune, you can keep going. When you are naturally latent, you go through the latency process, where in that moment where you get bit, your body instantly starts morphing and being ripped apart from the inside out. Sinews and veins start to form and bulge off your body and peel through your skin, and it's all in all a horrific, terrifying experience that instantly cracks you because of how painful and terrifying it is. And for the whole scene, you are convulsing and screaming in bloody agony, which of course draws zombies to you and the rest of your team, but also you can't do anything about it. So your team will have to make the choice of trying to drag your ass to safety or to just leave you there.
God.
Good old actually, what did you change Aiden's name to anything? Scrim?
He goes by, because you said we need different names. He goes by Obel.
Obel. Well, good old Obel had to feel what that experience was like.
Yes.
So that is that. I may have missed some other things, but we'll get into that when we get into things. That is the main stat thing for character creation. All right, everyone feeling okay so far? Any questions?
I have one question about the steward.
Mm-hmm.
Do you pretend to be a different thing?
What do you mean?
Like, if you are a steward, are you pretending to be like a hustler or like a roach or somebody, or are you just something?
You can pretend to be whatever you need to pretend to be.
Okay.
It is you will get like a mission, so to speak, or what your actual designation is or whatever. But
Well, yeah,
you can pretend. You can pretend to be whatever you need to pretend to be. Yep.
Yeah, you don't want people to know that you are a steward, but at the same time, like, you can't just go around being like, yeah, I'm a steward, but I do this. Like, no.
Are you gonna be a steward?
My day job is a steward, all right? At night, I'm DJ Flash. Oh, I guess I did forget another thing then. With dependents, with stewards, their weakness in too deep. So dependents can be your fellow takers, your fellow crew.
Oh.
The problem is with that is there's a downside to it. The upside being that you don't really have to pay for them, really. You still have to pay the bounty, but that's less for keeping them alive and happy and more for like, you know, going out to the bar together or like actually spending time as friends. Friends in the apocalypse? Who knew?
Can you imagine?
You imagine? Now the problem with it, though, the downside is that their pain is your pain and vice versa. First things first, the only way you can get first things first, if something happens to them, if they die, it still works as if your dependent has been severed. You can instantly gain a crack if they die. If they go through a traumatic experience, you have to roll self-control too. You care about them. So when shit goes down and they get hurt, you give a shit.
I do have a really quick question, more so for the rest of the group.
Okay.
Are we okay with children dependents?
I was actually going to ask the same thing because I was looking at having one.
You guys
Wait, like your child?
For my case, it would be orphan that was found.
You guys can take children as dependents.
Personally,
Can we get a raise of hands of how many of us have taken children as dependents? Because I've got my hand up right now.
Raising hand.
I haven't thought that far ahead yet, but like I'll make sure to raise my hand post conversation if I do.
We're the kids squad. You.
Baby squad.
Running a daycare around here.
But yeah, as a GM, I can say you guys can. I mean, that's some of the examples I used.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you guys.
Nice. But yeah, with stewards, the dependents have to be other takers, right? They can't be.
Yeah. So
Other people.
stewards, your dependents have to be other takers or takers that are in your crew.
Ah, okay.
Hmm.
And when it's a taker dependent, do they have to be like mutually dependent?
It only has to be mutually dependent if it's for a reason outside of being a steward.
Okay, cool. So stewards
Uh,
can just have anybody. That's really cool.
Yeah. So they can. It doesn't have to be like two-sided. Otherwise, it does definitely have to be two-sided. But their whole thing's being in too deep. They give a shit about the people that protect them. They don't give a shit about other people in the Enclave, but they give a shit about the people they're with most of their time with.
Aww.
Yeah, there's a soft spot to these merciless killers, essentially. Well, I guess not all of them are merciless killers. Lore-wise, the only reason people even know about stewards is because a few stewards turned sides and spread the knowledge of the fact that, hey, you know, the government is like asking people and agents to set up like in different like enclaves and then blow them up or let casualties in or something.
Yes, fucked up.
Yeah.
Chill.
And over the 5 years, only like 5 or 7 stewards have changed sides. And there's like infinite numbers of them. Again, boogeymen.
Scream.
Hey guys.
Mhm.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Blocked and reported.
Hey, you don't know shit.
You don't
You just
know
wait.
me.
You don't know me.
I don't even know who I am.
We don't know if you'll turn code or not.
They might.
That is true. You do. I don't
Can't
know.
wait for the intrigue. You didn't even know you were in mission.
I don't even know my name yet.
How easy sometimes.
Right. Do we have a medic so far, or
I have 1 point in it, but you don't want me.
Okay.
I also have 1 point in it, but like,
It's
do
fine.
you also want me?
You won't
I'll
infect
do it.
people by touching them.
Surprise. So before I let you guys spread your wings, there's just 2 other things we gotta go through. Of course, there's the
Mhm.
description history page, which I added onto this here. You can add an image of your character, notes that you want to keep on things, character history, anything if you want. You don't. It's a one shot. You don't really have to do it unless this ends up becoming a campaign later down the line if people want it. But that's for that. But of course, we have to actually go through you guys' equipment. Because that's important. Because you guys knowing what you guys each other have and knowing who has what and who does what is probably pretty important, right? So first things first then, it's staying on the character sheet. You always get 2 things that you have to pay for already right off the bat. You don't have to pay for it with your bounty that you get at character creation, but it's always an upkeep. First things first is your backpack. Because that's what allows you to carry haul and your personal gear. It counts as essential, so you always have it, but it also means you always have to pay for it. You can't do your job without a backpack. The next thing is rations.
Wait, where do we put that?
Oh, you don't. It's already on your sheet. If you look at your character sheet and you go to the bottom,
Oh, okay.
backpack and rations, always there. That is also where you'll go with rations. That is the drop down that you'll use for when you do athletic or weaponry based stuff, because that uses rations. Rations, of course, being your food. You need that. That is essential. So you always have it. You can't do your job if you're starving to death. So that's all the stuff that's like essential always. Getting into stuff that you guys can choose, you would be going to your gear plus bounty page. That is where you'll put down how much money you have. It will auto-calculate what your upkeep is, I'm pretty sure. If that's working properly, I hope. But it should be because I had to fix a few things. It will also calculate how much you need to do left to retire, along with other such things. This is where you'll put down your items. You don't have to type things in for the most part. It is all, well, mostly drop down, if I remember correctly. Let me just quickly. Well, yeah, it's all drop down. So the stats and stuff of items will pop up when you press on them and click on them, and they'll all automatically add themselves and stuff like that. If you need to like have a list in front of you, if you go to the main rule page, the economic horror book PDF, I'm gonna get the exact page for you, but I'm pretty sure it is page 245 is where the gear list starts.
Did you put the gear list under library as well?
Library is, it is under there, but that's mostly for pulling different stuff for populating the different boxes in the gear page. You can go based on the library though too. It's just not like in a very clean order.
Gotcha.
But if you want to like have like the actual like book thing, it's page 245 where it starts on the main book. The Veblen Goods book has a bunch of extra stuff that is not automatically put into the sheet, unfortunately, but that can be added, of course. And that's that for the most part. Another thing to consider also, vehicles are a thing. So if you have a character with drive, you're going to want to get a car, or you're not really going to be using drive. Cars are expensive, but they're also useful for getting haul and stuff like that, and for being faster than most things. Well, most things that don't have a car, of course. So it's something to consider. Main rules when it comes to cars, though, is that one person can foot the bill for the car, buying it itself, but everyone pays for the fuel, because if the car helps you eat, then the car eats first. And fuel is expensive, or more expensive. So there's an upkeep cost for fuel. And that comes from all your guys' collective paycheck.
All right.
So really quick about drive, is this like WoD, where like you don't have to have drive to know how to drive, or if you don't have a point, like you just can't drive anything?
So it's how it works when you don't have a point in something. There's two sets of rules, boom and bust rules. Bust rules is that if you don't have a point in something, you can't do it. I'm going to do, because it's a one shot, I'm going to do the boom rule variant of it, which is if you don't have something in it, you can still roll for it, but the roll is different. Usually it is red dice versus black dice. Black dice needs to get over red to succeed, right? When it comes to if you don't have a skill in something, you can roll for it. Your black dice, you don't have to get it above your red dice. Your black dice has to get below what your potential is. So if you were trying to shoot someone and you don't have skill in shoot, you can still shoot, but your black dice would have to get below whatever your speed is. So if your speed was 3, you would have to get 2 or 1. Ties go to the market.
Okay.
So if you were to get a tie, you fail the roll. And that's with any roll. Along with that, with the system, crit successes and crit fails are a thing if you roll doubles. So if your red dice and your black dice naturally roll the same thing, if it's an even number, it's a crit success. If it's an odd number, it's a crit fail.
Shit.
We all just scream together.
All of us just yeah.
So that is equipment. Now there's one last thing I'm going to do before I set you guys all off, because it could potentially change what you guys want to do with your character backstories and stuff like that. Essentially, in big campaign form, you guys would be getting together during this phase to also create your guys' home, your enclave. Its economy, how it formed, stuff like that, where it is. Of course, this is a one-shot, So I'll be giving you guys your enclave. Just give me a second real quick and I'll get that out. Where are
It would
you?
be really annoying really quick. Is the Enclave the place where the dependents stay?
It is where the dependents stay, and it's where you as takers also live. It's where you go home to. Your home.
Okay.
We're
So
called
we do
takers.
have a daycare. Just a daycare.
It also give you some ideas for your dependents as well, or whatever. Any other questions before I get into this?
Okay. Is there a list of possible specializations we can get anywhere?
I am not sure. I don't think so. Specializations only really pop up when it comes to equipment. So if you're looking through equipment and you see something that says you need to have a specialization, that's what you buy. Or that's what you
Okay.
have to buy.
Okay.
When it comes to profession, it can be anything.
Okay.
It's just the job that you had before, all this shit broke out, or after this shit broke out. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Cool beans.
I think I'm at that phase now where it's like it will make sense once I actually start doing the system.
Yeah. So I'll quickly go over the last thing. Your guys' home. If I can go and pull it up really quick.
Give us the daycare.
The fucking daycare.
Exactly how old is that kid that's going in the daycare?
Which one?
Yeah, there's a couple kids in there. That
Yeah,
go
there's a
Look,
few kids.
I call it a daycare because there's more than like 2, I think. Like it might be like at least 3.
Jesus.
Amazing. I actually have something I can give you guys real quick as well. Another link.
I was thinking like 12 for my dependent.
Oh.
Oh, thank God. Handshake.
Yeah, handshake.
Oh no.
We're not putting some toddler in there.
Oh my God.
Cowards.
Terrible
Right.
things could happen to a baby.
That baby would have changed already. I mean, he couldn't even handle the child.
You would have to have given birth, or somebody would have had to have given birth to the child during the crash or during the loss. So,
Yeah, if they're under
Yeah.
5, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone is very uppity about this.
Oh,
All right.
look at this.
I will get. Once everyone's in, I will begin regaling you of your home, whether it's been your home since the crash or you've roved here over time.